The little girl's voice was barely louder than a whisper, but it cut through the noise of the busy street like a violin string stretched too tight. "Please, please buy our puppy," she said, clutching the leash of a scruffy golden mutt whose ribs pressed faintly against its fur. Her wide eyes stared up at the man in the dark, tailored suit, a man she did not know had once signed the papers that ended her mother's job. He paused, frowning, not because of the puppy, but because of the odd feeling crawling up his chest. Something in her trembling lips, her shoes with the soles worn thin and flapping as she shifted, unsettled him. He should have kept walking. But he didn't. The girl's name was Lily, only 8, with her hair falling in uneven strands where her mother had cut it herself with dull scissors. Behind her, Sarah, her mother, stood with a cardboard box resting at her feet, taped corners, splitting from rain. Inside were scraps of clothes, a chipped coffee mug, and the last of the toys Lily hadn't wanted to give away. Sarah's eyes, dark and tired, scanned the street as if hoping someone might take pity. A folded eviction notice stuck out of her purse, curling at the edges. They had just been asked to leave their apartment, the fridge at home nearly empty, except for half a jar of pickles and an onion. Sarah's hands trembled as she adjusted the girl's coat, her dignity held together with quiet strength and sheer will. The man, Daniel, studied them. He was a CEO, one used to glass towers and espresso machines that hissed with precision. He had a sharp jawline, his hair slicked back neatly, and his leather shoes shone with polish. Just last night, he'd eaten steak in a candlelit restaurant where wine glasses clinked against marble tables. And yet, here he was, staring at a child asking him to buy a puppy. He shifted uneasily. "Why are you selling him?" he asked. Lily glanced at her mother, then whispered, "We can't feed him anymore. Mum says he deserves better." Her eyes glistened, her throat tightening as she tugged the leash protectively. Sarah turned her head away quickly, as though ashamed to let a stranger see her face crumple. Daniel swallowed, annoyed at the lump rising in his throat. He had fired hundreds of people before. Downsizing, restructuring, budget cuts. He'd signed her name months ago, but he didn't recognize her now, at least not yet. Still, something lingered in the tilt of her chin, the strength with which she stood, despite the threadbare coat wrapped around her frame. Sarah tried to speak, her voice low but steady. "I'm sorry. She shouldn't be bothering you, sir." "Come on, Lily." She bent down, gathering the cardboard box as her coat sleeve slipped back to reveal a wrist thinner than it should have been. The wind caught strands of her hair, and she brushed them from her face with tired grace. But Lily clung to the leash. "Please, just $5, that's all. Then we can buy bread." The words fell like stones. Bread. Not toys, not candy. Bread. Daniel's chest tightened, and he found himself staring at the child as if she were a reflection of something he'd forgotten existed. He opened his mouth to respond, but his phone buzzed in his pocket, flashing the name of a board member. For a second, he considered walking away. Hook. At that moment, the puppy licked Lily's hand, and the sight cracked something open inside him. He remembered when he was 12, his own mother counting coins on a counter to buy milk after his father left. He had buried that memory beneath years of ambition, yet it rushed back now with piercing clarity. Still pride battled with compassion. He slipped his phone away and asked, "Where do you live?" Sarah stiffened, suspicious. "It doesn't matter. We're fine." But the defiance in her voice faltered when Lily tugged at her sleeve and whispered, "Mum, please." Daniel studied Sarah again. The lines of exhaustion under her eyes, the way she bit her lip to keep from trembling. He recognized her then, not by face but by name. Sarah Miller. She'd been one of his best administrative coordinators before the layoffs. He remembered her efficiency, her crisp emails, and once the soft laugh she'd let out in the break room when someone spilled coffee. He remembered because it had startled him. Her laugh had been real in a world of forced politeness. and he'd signed her termination without hesitation. Now here she was, standing in the cold, her daughter begging him to buy a puppy. I know you, Daniel said, his voice low. Sarah's face paled, her lips parting in disbelief. She finally recognized him too. Her posture stiffened, her throat working as though swallowing glass. The weight of humiliation pressed between them, thick and suffocating. Lily looked from one to the other, confused.
Do you know him?
Sarah's eyes glistened, but she held her chin high, refusing to crumble in front of her child. Yes, she whispered, her voice cracking.
I used to work for him. The silence that followed was unbearable.
Daniel wanted to speak, to explain, to justify, but the words tangled inside him. The wind whipped through the street, carrying with it the faint sound of laughter from a cafe nearby, where warm lights glowed and cups steamed behind glass. The contrast was cruel. Finally, Sarah pulled Lily close, her hand trembling slightly. "We don't need charity," she said, though her voice betrayed the weight of hunger and fear.
Come on, sweetheart. They turned to walk away, the puppy padding beside them, tail low.
Daniel stood frozen, his heart hammering, caught between the life he lived and the one he had destroyed. Daniel's shoes clicked against the pavement as he caught up with them. "Wait," he said, his tone sharper than he intended. Sarah stopped but didn't turn around. Her shoulders were tense, rigid, as if bracing for another blow. Lily peeked back at him, eyes wide and searching, the puppy shifting restlessly at her side. The man who had once signed their fate now stood inches away, his tailored coat brushing against the wind, his throat tightening with words he wasn't sure he had the right to speak. "I didn't know it would come to this," Daniel said, softer now.
I didn't know they let you go. Sarah turned finally, her face illuminated by the streetlight, pale and resolute.
"You signed the letter."
You knew. The accusation wasn't screamed, just whispered, but it landed heavier than a shout.
She stood with her daughter clutched to her side, the cardboard box digging into her arm, a strand of hair plastered against her cheek from the drizzle that had begun to fall. She looked like a woman stripped of everything but her pride. "I was following orders," he tried, his voice hollow even to his own ears. She gave a bitter laugh. "Of course, following orders while people like us are left with eviction notices and empty fridges." Her hand tightened on the box.
Her knuckles pale. Re-hook. Lily's stomach growled audibly.
A sound too loud for such a small body, and her cheeks flushed as she lowered her eyes. The puppy whined softly as though echoing her hunger. Daniel's gaze fell to her worn-through sneakers, the duct tape on the strap, the frayed backpack with one broken zipper. It was undeniable what he had done by a single stroke of a pen. Something cracked inside him. He reached into his wallet, pulling out bills, but Sarah stepped back.
"No," she said firmly.
"We don't want handouts." "It's not a handout," Daniel said, struggling to control the urgency rising in his voice.
It's me trying to make something right." Sarah hesitated, her lips pressed tight.
Pride and desperation waged war on her face. But then Lily tugged gently at her sleeve.
"Mum, maybe we can buy milk."
"Just this once." The woman's eyes closed briefly, her throat tightening. She finally nodded, just barely. Daniel slipped the money into her hand, more than enough for groceries and maybe even rent, and for the first time all night, she didn't push it away. Her fingers trembled as she accepted it, though her gaze still burned with guarded suspicion. "Let me help you more than this," Daniel said quietly.
"Please, you were one of the best employees I had. I shouldn't have let you go." Sarah looked at him for a long moment, as if weighing whether to believe him.
Her voice, when it came, was low and raw. "Words don't change the fact that my daughter went to bed hungry last night." His chest ached. He glanced toward the glowing cafe across the street.
"They'll let me feed her tonight."
"Just one meal. After that, you can decide if you want anything more from me." The hesitation hung thick in the air until Lily whispered, "Mum, please. It smells so good in there." She pointed to the cafe window where steam curled above mugs of hot chocolate. Sarah's lips quivered. At last she sighed. Fine, one meal. Inside the cafe, the contrast was almost unbearable. The warmth enveloped them instantly, and Lily pressed her hands to the cup of cocoa Daniel ordered for her, steam fogging her lashes. She drank in greedy little sips, wiping her upper lip with the back of her hand. Sarah sat across from Daniel, still tense, her coat damp against the chair. She barely touched the soup he had ordered, her eyes darting as though waiting for the ground to vanish beneath her again. Daniel studied them both, the sight of their fragility cutting into him deeper than any boardroom battle ever had.
"I want to do more," he said finally.
"I have an opening at the office. If you're willing, I'd like to bring you back. Not as charity, because I need someone like you." Sarah blinked, stunned. "You can't just fix everything with a job offer." "No," he admitted.
"But maybe I can give you the chance you should never have lost." The silence stretched.
Then Lily, her cheeks flushed from the cocoa, leaned toward her mother and whispered, "Please say yes."
"Mom, then we can keep Buddy." She hugged the puppy tight,
burying her face in its scruffy fur. Sarah's throat worked, tears brimming in her eyes. She looked at Daniel, at her daughter, at the fragile hope clinging to them all. Slowly, she nodded. "All right, I'll try." Relief surged through him, and for the first time in years, Daniel felt lighter. He didn't know if this would redeem the choices he had made, but he knew one thing with certainty. Ignoring them on the street would have haunted him forever. Weeks later, Sarah sat at a desk again, her posture straighter, her hair pulled back with quiet confidence. Lily skipped beside Buddy in the park on weekends, laughter spilling into the air. Daniel sometimes joined them, not as a savior, but as a man reminded that power meant nothing without humanity. And as he watched the little girl race with her puppy across the grass, he understood what he had almost lost, the chance to remember that one act of generosity.
One moment of noticing could reroute a life, because sometimes
The smallest voices hold the greatest truths.